Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're jumping into something really interesting that one of you actually flagged for us. The idea of using 3D printing. How it could potentially help tackle homelessness.
Yeah, it's a fascinating intersection of tech and social issues.
Totally. And we came across this really compelling blog post on Future Tech-Wise. It's by Kenton Patterson. He's a Kiwi advocate. Seems really passionate about tech making a real difference.
Right, Patterson's piece, it definitely paints a hopeful picture, doesn't it? Suggesting this pretty advanced way of building might offer some genuine solutions.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive, really, is to get under the hood. How does 3D printing actually work for housing? What are the different angles? And crucially, are there real-world examples?
Let's do it. It's a complex problem, homelessness, so seeing how tech fits in. Yeah.
Okay, so first things first, 3D printing in construction. I mean, when I first heard it, I sort of pictured a giant machine just like spitting out a whole house.
Yeah, it's a common image. It's a bit more involved, but maybe not that far off in principle.
Okay.
So in construction, 3D printing is basically additive manufacturing. You're building something up layer by layer.
Additive, right, adding material, not taking it away.
Exactly. You've got a specialized printer, often a big robotic arm with a nozzle, and it extrudes materials. Usually it's some kind of engineered concrete composite. And it follows a precise digital blueprint, a computer design. So think of it like a robot mason, maybe, laying down these layers very accurately.
Okay, a robot mason. I like that. So it's not bricks and mortar in the traditional sense.
Not usually, no. It's extruding this concrete mix, sometimes fiber reinforced, sometimes geopolymers, chosen for strength, speed of setting, maybe even sustainability.
Right. So Patterson's post really hammers home the advantages over, the old way of building. Speed seems like a huge one.
Oh, absolutely. It's probably the most dramatic difference. Traditional building, it takes months, sometimes years, right?
Yeah, easily.
With 3D printing, especially for smaller structures, you're potentially talking about printing the basic shell of a home in, well, days. Maybe even less than 24 hours of print time in some cases.
Wow. Days.
Yeah.
That's a massive difference.
It's a fundamental shift.
Yeah.
Think about disaster relief, emergency housing, getting people into safe structures quickly. That speed is critical.
Yeah, I can see that. And then there's the cost. That's another big point he makes.
Right. The potential cost reduction is also really significant.
How does that work? Is it just the materials?
It's a few things, actually. First, labor costs are lower because the machine's doing a lot of the heavy lifting, the structural work.
Okay.
Second, material waste. Traditional construction generates a lot of waste offcuts, unused bits. 3D printing is much more precise. It only puts material exactly where the design says it needs it. Much less waste.
That makes sense.
And Patterson also mentions reduced logistical complexity. Fewer different trades needed on site at the same time, perhaps. A more streamlined process overall.
So what kind of costs are we talking? He gives some figures, right?
Yeah, he mentions estimates, and these can vary a lot, of course, but somewhere in the range of like $10,000 to $20,000 US per home for the basic structure.
10, 20,000. That's, in many places, that's less than a deposit on a traditional house.
Exactly. It highlights the potential for scaling up affordable housing projects in a way that's just not feasible with conventional methods.
Okay, so faster, cheaper, less waste.
Yeah.
It sounds almost too good to be true. But Patterson is clear, isn't he? This isn't like the single answer to homelessness.
Absolutely not. And that's really crucial to understand. Homelessness is incredibly complex. Social factors, economic factors, mental health policy.
Right.
3D printing is a tool, a potentially very powerful tool for the housing part of the equation, but it's just one component in a much bigger strategy.
Okay, got it. So let's dig into why it could be such a game changer in that housing component. He talks about rapid construction of emergency shelters first.
Yeah, and that ties back to the speed advantage we mentioned. Yeah. When there's a natural disaster or any crisis that displaces people suddenly, the need for shelter is immediate. Being able to deploy 3D printers, maybe mobile ones, and get basic sturdy shelters up quickly, it's potentially life-saving.
Yeah, much better than, say, tents in the long run.
Definitely. More secure, more stable, better protection from the elements. It offers a different level of immediate response.
And then the lower building costs, we touched on that 10K, 20K figure. The impact for governments, charities.
It's huge, potentially. Imagine organizations working on tight budgets. If they can build safe, decent housing for significantly less money.
They can help more people.
Exactly. They can stretch their resources much further, build more units, house more families. It changes the economics of providing affordable housing.
Now, something else that caught my eye was sustainability.
Yeah.
Because, concrete doesn't always scream eco-friendly.
That's a fair point, but there are a few angles to the sustainability argument here.
Good.
First, as Patterson notes, there's a lot of research going into greener concrete alternatives and composites, specifically for 3D printing. Material science is advancing. Second, that reduction in waste we talked about, that's a direct environmental benefit. Less material used, less landfill.
Right. Less waste is always good.
And third, many designs for 3D printed homes are focused on energy efficiency from the start. The shapes you can create can be optimized for heating and cooling, potentially lowering energy use over the building's lifetime.
Interesting. Okay. And beyond the building itself, he also talks about jobs and skills.
Yeah, which is maybe slightly counterintuitive if you think about automation replacing jobs.
Right. Less manual labor needed on site.
True for some traditional roles, perhaps, but this technology creates new roles. You need skilled people to operate and maintain these sophisticated printers.
Technicians, yeah.
Technicians, exactly. People to manage the materials, the software, designers who understand how to create the digital blueprints for these structures.
So there's an opportunity there.
A big one, potentially. Patterson suggests creating training programs, maybe specifically targeting individuals experiencing homelessness or at risk, to give them these new, in-demand skills. It's a pathway to employment in a growing field.
That's a really positive angle. And last point he makes about why it's a game changer is global scalability.
This isn't just a solution for, say, wealthy countries with high-tech resources.
It can adapt.
Exactly. The technology itself is adaptable. You can change designs based on local climate, cultural preferences. You can potentially even adapt the material mixes to use more locally sourced ingredients in some cases.
So it could work in New Zealand, as Patterson implies, but also
Latin America, Africa, India. Wherever there's a need for affordable, rapid housing construction, the principles are transferable, even if the specifics change.
Okay, so the potential is clear. But theory is one thing. Patterson gives some real-world examples, which really helps ground it. He mentions Icon and New Story quite a bit.
Yeah, they're probably one of the most high-profile partnerships in this space. Icon makes the printing technology.
And New Story is the nonprofit.
Right. They work on the ground, identifying needs, managing the projects, working with the communities. And together, they've actually built entire communities of 3D printed homes.
Communities, not just one-off houses.
Yes, in places like Mexico, Haiti. And it's important, as Patterson stresses, these aren't just bare-bones structures. They're designed to be proper, dignified homes, resilient, culturally suitable for the families moving in.
He has that quote, doesn't he? These aren't just structures, they're homes filled with laughter, dreams, and second chances.
Yeah, that really captures the human element, doesn't it? It's not just about the tech, it's about the impact on lives.
Definitely hits home. He also mentions trials in the Netherlands. A bit different.
Yeah, the Dutch examples seem more focused on integrating 3D printing into, sustainable urban living experiments. Mainstream housing, almost.
Okay.
So it shows the versatility. It's not only for emergency or low-cost housing, although that's a major focus. It can be part of innovative urban development, too.
And then projects in India and Africa focusing on local materials. Solar power.
Right. That really highlights the adaptability and the focus on true affordability and sustainability in different contexts. Using local resources cuts down transport costs and emissions. Integrating solar makes the homes cheaper to run long-term, which is critical in low-income areas. It's about creating solutions that work ecologically and economically on the ground.
Okay, so seeing these examples really makes it feel, well, real. Possible.
Absolutely.
Now, since Patterson is writing from a New Zealand perspective, he naturally pivots to what his own country could learn. And, New Zealand does face significant housing challenges.
It does. Affordability, homelessness, these are big issues there, like in many places. So he suggests Senzi could really embrace this tech and tailor it.
He talks about pop-up villages. What does that mean exactly?
I think the idea is using the speed of 3D printing to quickly create small, temporary, or transitional communities for people who are unhoused.
So not just individual shelters, but a small cluster.
Yeah, maybe with shared facilities, support services on site. A way to provide immediate, safe, and somewhat communal living space rapidly where it's needed most.
That's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
And he also mentions using it for emergency housing for people
Yeah.
fleeing domestic violence.
Right. Again, the speed and the ability to create secure private spaces quickly could be absolutely crucial in these terrible situations, offering a safe haven almost immediately.
Yeah, safety and speed are paramount there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the idea of sustainable tiny home communities, that taps into a bigger trend, doesn't it?
It does. Tiny homes, minimalism, sustainable living. 3D printing could potentially make building these communities faster, maybe cheaper, and allow for really innovative, energy-efficient designs. Perhaps with shared gardens, resources, support networks built in.
So lots of potential applications for a place like New Zealand.
Definitely.
But Patterson is careful to say it requires collaboration, right? It's not just about buying a printer.
Absolutely crucial point. He emphasizes needing everyone pulling together. Government providing support, favorable policies, iwi Maori communities being involved to ensure solutions are culturally right and equitable,
Community leaders, social services.
knowing the needs on the ground, and of course the tech innovators. It has to be a partnership to navigate regulations, cultural factors, and make sure it actually works for the people it's meant to help.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
You can't just drop tech into a complex social problem.
No, the tech is an enabler, but the implementation needs care, thought, and collaboration.
So wrapping up, Patterson brings it back to this idea of a future built with compassion and concrete. He repeats that homelessness is multifaceted.
Yeah, it bears repeating. 3D printing housing is powerful, but it won't end homelessness on its own. You still need policy change, mental health support, addiction services, community acceptance, all of it.
It's a whole ecosystem of support.
Exactly. But the housing piece is foundational, and that's where 3D printing comes in. Patterson seems to see it as giving people a vital head start.
A head start, how so?
By providing that safe, stable, affordable, dignified housing quickly, it creates a foundation, a platform from which people can start to address the other challenges in their lives. It offers security, hope.
Right. It's hard to deal with anything else if you don't know where you'll sleep tonight.
Precisely. So provide the home, and it makes tackling the other issues more possible. His final thought is really about that synergy technology plus humanity. Tech innovation combined with compassion can make real progress.
Wow. Okay. Well, this has been genuinely fascinating, really diving into how this tech, which still feels a bit futuristic sometimes, is actually becoming a real tool for tackling such a fundamental problem. You know, our listener who suggested this wanted quick but thorough knowledge, and I feel like we've really unpacked the core ideas here.
I think so too. We've looked at the how, the additive manufacturing part, the why, the advantages like speed, cost, sustainability, and the where those real-world examples from Mexico to the Netherlands.
Yeah, seeing it in action makes a difference.
It really does. It shows the promise isn't just theoretical.
So, listener, as you mull all this over, here's maybe a final thought to take away, building on Patterson's ideas. How could adopting these kinds of technologies locally, in your community, tailored specifically to the needs, the resources, the culture, right where you are, how could that amplify the impact even further? How could it help build a society that's more resilient, more inclusive?
That's a powerful question to consider. What does it look like on the ground, in practice, where you live?
Definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure.